We're live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this wintry April day in Mahone Bay. Town Council is having a special meeting today. We have an agenda published, but we'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. Welcome, members of council and staff. We do have an agenda that was emailed to you. And with a call to order, we'll ask for approval of the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Now, seconded by Councillor Feeney. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Our only agenda item today is the discussion around the old fire station building, which becomes surplus to our requirements for a fire station with the opening of the new fire station to happen shortly. And so council needs to have a discussion on what the potential uses of the old building might be. So with that, I would ask the CAO if he would like to share his thoughts with us and get us on that track.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just recap. This was referred to this special meeting from a report delivered to the March 8th, 2022 council meeting. That was from our manager of public works and transportation, Jonathan Ullman, and concerned the need to relocate the public works department. And ultimately, in addition to reporting on the condition of the current building and the challenges there, recommended that the old fire station, the current and soon to be former fire station building would be an ideal home for the public works department operation and provide additional space to the utilities as well, who are especially electrical in need of storage and bay area in town. So that was Jonathan's recommendation, essentially that we look in that direction by undertaking a review with an external consultant to ensure that there are no unexpected surprises in relation to this plan, learning from past experience that we engage appropriate project management services to look at the potential to relocate the public works department and utility storage to the old fire station building. And I guess an additional bit worthy of note to anyone viewing, if you don't know the long history of it, the current garage out back to the town hall, which Public Works has been using now for a very long time, was originally the former fire station. So this would be essentially a pattern where the fire department moves into new digs and the Public Works department moves in behind them. So that's the recommendation, was essentially referred to this meeting for discussion. And I think there probably are some comments that members of council want to make. I'm here to answer any questions and then reiterate that at this time or at a future meeting of council, that motion remains the recommendation of staff.
Thank you, CAO. Members of council, you've seen that report included in the agenda of the March 8th council meeting. What are your thoughts on the potential or proposed uses of the old fire hall? Anyone? Councillor Burdick, Councillor Feeney, and Councillor Carver.
Thank you. It strikes me that it's already a building that has been set up for a community use, and not that having it as a storage unit wouldn't be a form of community use because it would be used by the town. But the location, the accessibility of that particular location also makes me think that it could be a good possible place for something like a daycare, something that would have day use specifically. You know, I mean, I also could see it being, because it's not a giant footprint, but it's a significant footprint that it could be housing as well. I think the nighttime aspect of what it would be like to live right next to a fire hall might be something to be considered. However, there are houses right adjacent already, so that is maybe something just to be taken into consideration. I know there would be a lot of retrofits and renovations that would be needed, but I feel like that would be the case if it were anything, but especially something that would be for use in that manner. We do have this new, the intent has been shown, you know, provincially as well as federally for affordable daycare. And that has always been an issue on the South Shore, and specifically in this town. And it, as an aspect of making it a more age-friendly place, and a place that is accessible to people at different income levels, and in different sort of family situations, specifically for women, it would be a real boon to the town to have a daycare in that location. However, so that would be something I'd be interested in seeing pursued in terms of sort of investigating that possibility, even if it turns out that that isn't a possibility. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Feeney.
Thank you, Mayor. So, you know, have given this some thought as we've entertained this, you know, scenario, I guess, since early March. I think my preliminary thoughts are as follows. So, you know, fundamentally, I think the CAO and the staff have articulated the merits of improved facilities for public works. And, you know, I think I certainly acknowledge, and I think there's probably wide-ranging alignment across council that the existing garage behind the town hall may not need, it doesn't meet the current and future needs of public works. But that being said, it's not crystal clear to me that the fire hall, the former fire hall, specifically aligns with the public works requirements, and it can be done so with a cost structure that's kind of logical. So I do think it was an obvious candidate to potentially resolve the long-term requirements of public works. I mean, it's got a bay, it's got lights, the town owns it. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of meat on the bone there on why that could be a logical idea. But I can't help think that an approach where we evaluated specifically the requirements of public works, which today is a kind of non-heated, you know, outbuilding, moving to a heated concrete bricks and mortar with a high operating cost. I don't know, that to me, that's a bit of a leap. I guess what I'd prefer to do is to take a kind of a slower approach to try to work with the public works team and Jonathan's team to identify a list of requirements. Sorry, that must be Colo barking at Kelly's dog across the street there. But identify what the public works requirements are, and then maybe look at a facility built specifically to address those needs on public town land, and then evaluate the merits of just divesting the existing building and to put it in the hands of the public to be determine what the best and highest use of that building would be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver.
Yes, thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Feeney's comments for more evaluation, I would certainly like to see more evaluation of different possible uses for that building and that property, and possibly in conjunction with the property across the Hawthorne Road, which is currently used as a site for storage of public works equipment and materials. Um, I would like to see, for example, at least a preliminary assessment or report about the possibilities of using that building, that site, or the combined sites as a site for housing, which might include daycare as well. There's space, and there's something about citing the public works right in a prime residential area, despite the fact that it's right beside an active fire station, and wonder what other sites there might be to locate the public works needs. So I would really like to have more evaluation, including evaluation of the possibility of using that property and the adjoining property for housing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carver. Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Wilson.
So I appreciate all the thoughts. I think some of you or most of you are reading my thoughts about, I think, how I'd love to see things go. I think my first initial comment would be, I guess, the approach we take most likely determines the outcome we'll get at the end of this of the process. And so I was uncomfortable with the approach in us coming to make a decision at the last time. So I think from my perspective, I'd want us to refresh that completely and take a totally different approach. And I think some of the things that have been mentioned here, I completely agree around a very good look at what this building can be for. I definitely agree that Public Works needs a space, and they need a space that, from my perspective, I think we need to look at doing something purpose-built for Public Works. So some kind of a proper needs analysis. This is what will be required now. This is what might be required 5 years, 10 years down the road, and sort of coming up with a plan for what that kind of structure might look like and where we can build it, and then figuring out what we can do and what we can get now, and maybe what can be gotten in the future. When I think about construction costs are not going to go down. From my perspective, they're still going to keep going up. So if we invest a significant chunk of change into this project, sort of get it into usable space for Public Works, a few years down the road, we will have to invest again. So similar to what we did on the town hall. So I think just protecting the future, I would think if we can do something now, especially given I hopes that we still have not very high interest rates, given that there's still some income that we have right now. We don't know what the situation is going to be 5-10 years down the road. So I think that's something we need to think about, and it's maybe difficult to sort of convince and sell it to the community, but I think it's something we might find some things to think about. I would love to see us in many ways even tap or reach to the community and get some ideas, like had been mentioned before. I think it was Councillor Wilson who mentioned there might be great ideas in the community there about how that space can be used, with different kinds of ideas before we go and spend money, council money, to do something that in many ways will be is funneled by what we think we need to do right now. I think opening it up a little bit more might be great. I'm curious. I know, at least from my end, I've referred one person to town hall who had asked questions about what that building will be used for, and I think they had some ideas. So I'm also curious as to how many folks have contacted town office, maybe a CEO or town clerk, and what kinds of ideas have been put out there by community, even if maybe they were deemed not to be reasonable. I think it's important that the council gets to hear some of those ideas, so that we can, as we deliberate and think about it, we can, I guess, expand our thoughts about what that looks like. Right now, daycare has been mentioned, housing has been mentioned. There might be other things that we haven't even considered that might be very beneficial to the community as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you. Clerk or CAO, did you want to answer the question about what we have gotten from the public? Clerk?
I believe one of my colleagues had an email about someone saying, if I wanted to pitch this idea, what would I do? First of all, I don't recall what that idea was. Second, even if I did, I'm not, it was an if. But in that case, the response, as our response always is, would be to, if this is something that you want to put forward, to communicate with council. I have had one discussion with a member of the community, and I believe that's the person the deputy mayor was referencing having sent our way. That part of that conversation, ultimately it was the same thing. If this is something that you're interested in, it would be important to forward that idea to council, because we have no direction on what council intends to do. That's always the question. What is going to happen with that old building? And we don't know, because there's no council direction on that at this point. As to what that idea was, I'm not comfortable sharing that, because that person, it was a, I would classify it as a community serving business, but that person did in fact say they weren't sure what to do about it yet because of the business implications. So I'm not, if that person wasn't comfortable sharing at that point, I don't think I can share it. But I think a community serving business would be the only one that I could say I've had a discussion about.
CAO and then Councillor Wilson.
Just a couple of things in addition to Mo. Thank you, Mo. So this, obviously, this building's been talked about now for a number of years, since council's been talking about and then actually going ahead with the fire station project. In that time, I've been approached by folks with essentially two types of questions about it. I have had people ask, what is it, what is going to become of the building? And as Mo pointed out, we don't really have any direct way to respond to that at this time. And we have had people who have expressed an interest in whether the building would be put up for sale at some point, or even made available as a, to donate for some other purpose. So those conversations have been had, I think, going back to quite a long time, even before the fire station was actually agreed to, because council had floated this notion in prior years. I haven't had anyone suggest a specific purpose like housing or daycare other than from council. Have had people suggest that the public works garage thing makes sense. And I guess I just wanted to add on that note that most recently at asset management, we did have a discussion at the committee level where people had raised that question. And we talked about the report that this was after the March 8th meeting. So it was on the record that Public Works had made this recommendation. And I think generally people around that table were certainly not fazed by the notion that it would remain a municipal property. That doesn't mean that there aren't other people who would like to see a public process on that.
Okay, thank you, CAO. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you.
And then Councillor Now.
Yes, I guess I'd like to start by underlining what Councillor Feeney said at the outset. This to me, it seems to me that this is quite a valuable building. If we keep it and basically use a building that up till now has been used as a kind of a conference center, bingo hall, and et cetera, and turn that into basically storage space. And by doing that, add around $30,000 a year to our cost base, because it's going to cost that much to heat it. And but it's probably going to be more than that, because there's also maintenance issues and so on and so forth. It seems to me that rather than do that, if we put the entire facility on the market, we can probably generate a significant piece of money. I don't know how much, but at $130 odd a square foot, that translates to about $1 million worth of real estate, if that in fact is the case. Remembering that place is a garage. It has a very well-constructed kitchen. It has a big hall. It has 3 washrooms. It's a very, very good facility and quite an expensive facility. We could, I think, comfortably and very effectively build something that was exactly suited to our needs for considerably less than that, and could find a place across the street, I'm sure, to do that. I toyed with the idea of maybe we should talk about going out for a request for proposals and put the public works people in the bays where the fire trucks are now in the immediate future. But that becomes a bit messy and a bit untidy, and I think we'd be far better off fiscally and just in terms of future planning to just put it on the market as an entirety and plan on building something that we need for public works. So that's my position.
Okay, Councillor Dow.
Well, Councillor Wilson answered part of my thoughts, because I was thinking that maybe we should move Public Works in there, mainly because the building they're in right now, they can't do anything in it. They can't do any work on any of the pieces of equipment that we have, that type of thing. So they could make a good use of the bay part of the facility. I'm not sure about the other parts of this facility, what we'd want to do with that. I'm not sure we'd want to spend a whole lot of money on converting that into quote unquote storage space. I guess it really depends on what we think, or what we would in reality get for the current facility. And we'd have to watch for the access road that goes up alongside of the facility to the new fire station, which is going to be a access road for the fire station, because I think it's actually addressed off of that road. So, we have to consider that too. Depending if we can get enough money out of it to try to build some sort of a facility, yes. But I still think the garage part of it would make a excellent facility for the public works. Then we could consider what we want to do with the rest of it. Maybe I had heard it mentioned at one point somewhere along the way that maybe we could put a branch of the public library in there, which would be a big boon for the town also, if we had a branch right in town rather than the bookmobile, although it serves a good purpose. I think a branch would serve even more of a purpose for the town.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. These are all interesting ideas. I do think that this is one of those moments where we have an opportunity to think about what our plans are for the town in the sense of how we want it to be shaped, what our mandate is, the things that we've agreed are important to the community and to the possible community that could keep growing here. So I do think it is worth, I usually think this, but I think it's worth taking to the public in the sense of having, maybe it could be somewhat guided, so it's not a totally open-ended thing, but putting some of these possibilities on the list and then having a place where other ideas could come in to play. But this is an opportunity for us in a way to say, okay, we have a place that could become something else. Is at this point, to me, I agree that a public works building obviously is a necessity. I think that I do agree that a purpose-built place would be a good idea, but I also think that it's not, maybe not, but, and I also think that a focus on actually working to have good affordable housing / daycare, that is true. It could be a multi-use sort of situation, is worth pursuing. And this is an opportunity for us to say, well, we can even say maybe not have it on the market at full rate, and in order to make something happen that we want to see happen, rather than throwing it to the market and saying that determines things. That's part of our role, I guess, is to say, well, we have, this is a way that we can make things happen or help make things happen. And if the community's like, no, just sell that, get the most money from it. I do think that sometimes, though, having these options put out there helps people see that there are options for it, and that that participation means that they can have their say and say, I would like a place to live that's not well beyond my means. I don't want to have to leave town. I want to have a place where my kids can be before, they go to school, so that I can work, etc. I mean, it's just a matter of thinking of the different priorities for the town. And I think those are priorities to be considered.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Feeney.
Just finally, I think, so there's some new news coming out of this meeting. I think this is really probably the first time that council's been able to formally articulate that there is support for, appropriate public works space. As you all know, in our multi-year capital program, that requirement has never been formally included in our town's capital priority list. And so, because we've been used to making do, but we also have new equipment, and we also have new responsibilities for Riverport as well on the electrical side. So, I think bringing the issue around the public works building and that facility to the top, I think is worthwhile to do. Second thing is that we've made a number of decisions over the course of this year, and even some due diligence that the CAO has brought to our attention around further capital projects that would drive us to butt up against the ability of us to continue to borrow. So I think at a time where the real estate market is robust, and the time is right for us to kind of move this agenda along, but we need more information on a couple fronts. One, I think there's kind of wide-ranging speculation of value. Like, what would the market perceive as the value of the facility? That's an unknown. And I think we have some, in our minds, we have some high water marks and some low water marks. And obviously the decisions will be greatly influenced by, where we think the market would value the building. And two, I do think, to Jonathan and Dylan and Maureen's credit, we've never really asked for a formal documentation of exactly what we think the requirements are for that building, because we always had this building as a scenario, and there was, so the focus was really on using the fire hall rather than a purpose-built facility. So I think those two takeaways and providing some energy behind, one, crafting the specifications in some kind of a logical document that inevitably could potentially go out to the market to seek quotes from a Roscoe or Lindsay or whoever would do those kinds of things. I'm sure it's a wide-ranging list, as well as having some real estate experts provide staff with some expert opinions on what they think that building would yield in the open marketplace. I think if we had those two data points, then we would be able to revisit this conversation and really bring it together.
Okay. Councillor Carver has her hand up, and then the deputy mayor.
Yes, I agree about the need for those two information documents or documentation that Councillor Feeney has just listed. And I would also argue that it would be useful to have some estimate of the usability of that property for an alternative use that could be supported by the town in some way. And I'm thinking along the lines of land trust, for donating land as a land trust, for example, for housing. I mean, is that within the realm of possibility? Is it feasible? There's a lot of questions there, but I'm very interested in the concept of talking more about the possibility of that, using that land for housing. And I have a question that perhaps I should have asked before the meeting, but is the property the town's to do with as it wishes? Well, after consultation and decision making. I had understood that there was might be some ambiguity about the title. It may be a question for the CAO.
Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, so we had gone over a list of town properties at as a management committee a few meetings back, and there are properties that show in the registry as unmigrated from other terms. So the property that the fire station, the new and old, and the tennis club is located on is registered in the name of the Mahone Bay Fire Department, which is an operating name of the town, but which hasn't been migrated. There's also a similar issue with both the Bayview Cemetery and Park Cemetery not showing as they're shown as being owned by the cemeteries, which don't exist as independent entities. So these things should have been cleared up years ago. We have reached out to our lawyers about them post that meeting with the asset management committee, just to ask about the possibility of getting these things fixed up. So that's something that would need to be done in an association with investigating the potential for subdivision, which I think one of you mentioned, Richard, I think mentioned that you'd have to craft carefully the boundaries of the parking area and everything with respect to the access to the pool parking and the salt sand shed and the back entrance to the new fire station. So I think it all can be done, but it would require some investigation by our lawyers on the subdivision and title issues.
Thank you, CAO. Deputy Mayor?
So I guess personally, I'm feeling very uncomfortable about us investing a bunch of money to have the building assessed for various other things. My suggestion would be that we choose the approach we want to take, and that approach determines the kinds of things we do. If we feel, which I think I'm on that side of things, which if we feel the building is not ideal for a public works function, let's go through a similar process a town would go through, or an individual will go through, determining what they want for a particular building and have that designed and figure out where the best location would be, and deal with that as a distinct project. And this building becomes a case of what do we do with it that is within the best interests of the town, and then figure out what that might be, rather than invest a significant chunk of change investigating whether it's housing, whether it's public works, whether it's daycare, whether it's many other things. I know you probably all know I would love for that to be an affordable housing development, but I don't think the town is doing affordable housing. I don't think we've committed to us being the ones doing that. We will need a partner or somebody who would be able to come and do that. And that's what I was saying. Well, we probably need to reach out to the community and sort of say, we have this building. Do you have any proposals or suggestions? And take a bit of time, slow things down. There's no rush, and get that determined. Who can give us a good evaluation of what the market value of that would be, which I guess will bring an elephant in the room when we're trying to make decisions as to forego that and maybe donate or things like that. But it will give us a number that we don't, from my perspective, have to pay $12,000 to go and get. If we want a public works building, let's design that and do something purpose built for that, something that can have lifts with, if guys want to go and work on the trucks or any of the machinery, rather than try and cram something where it wasn't designed for that. Which might seem it might seem like it's a quick fix solution, but when I'm thinking down the road, we'll just be dumping money in there to make it fit what you want it to be. So my approach would be, let's get that property evaluated by a real estate agent or person who can give us a good value for a good market value for it. It will give us some numbers for us to think about, and let's think about or go through a process of figuring out what we need for a purpose-built building, what kinds of functionalities that they will require. Then we can look at the various pieces of land. I think we talked about next to the water treatment plant, there was a piece of land that is supposed to go on the market with model. Maybe that's somewhere where we can put a structure there rather than sell it off. So let's take a breather, give ourselves some time and come up with some. So rather than just spend money so that we can get a report that we'll start thinking about, I would go almost like the cheap route, find some numbers without having to pay too much, and then evaluate as we go along. But for the public works building, let's design something. And I know that we might be saying, well, it might cost us too much, but let's know what that might be, something that's purpose built, because that's something that we probably need for a long-term fix of the issue. We've not discussed it before because it wasn't priority. This shift is sort of triggering that prioritization to bring it to the top of the list. We can see that the building that they're using right now is running down. It's an embarrassment in many ways. So even that maybe even becomes another case of evaluating that piece of land. If that building was not there, what can be done there and things like that. So there's lots of options from my perspective.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Now.
Yeah, I agree that, something we should investigate is to do a purpose-built building, depending on the cost and whether we can afford it or not. But in the meantime, how long are we going to make Public Works work in that old building that's behind the town hall? It's certainly not safe conditions for them to be there, and they can't do anything there as it is right now. So, how far down the road are we going to push this thing off?
Okay, thank you. CAO.
I thought I'd appreciate that, and I appreciate all the comments around the need for a purpose-built public workspace. I'm sure that would be the ideal scenario for Public Works, and I'm sure they'd be pleased to hear this discussion at council. But to Councillor Now's point about how do we move forward in the immediate term, it seems like there's two straightforward ways to do that. If I could just share my screen for one moment, is that all right, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
So these would kind of be the two scenarios for a motion to get us from here to the next step that I would generally imagine. You can tell there's a little bit of a difference in terms of the route that we'd be going about. Well, I'd say A is the more thorough option, but essentially that we would either issue a request for proposals for pre-design and estimation services in relation to a proposed new public works garage. So that would be a little bit more serious and get somebody with whom the public works staff can brainstorm and lay out their needs and who is knowledgeable about the options to address that and how can provide council with detailed estimation in relation to that. Or to obtain an estimated cost for the new public works garage, which is typically to float to possible contractors who would be interested in building that space with a little bit of scope that could be developed in-house. So those are kind of two approaches. I think staff would recommend the first, but have in the past generally used the second. But it would be great to see some movement on this. If council was inclined to do that at this meeting, that is certainly in order.
CAO, both of those options reflect building a new public works building?
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus
Yeah.
here, so I just figured we'd zero in on that.
What about an estimate of cost to convert the current fire hall to a building appropriate to public works?
Well, that was sort of the original proposal, was that we would obtain that, but my understanding from the discussion today, it seems like most council members are not supportive of that option. So we could do both, put both on the table, and then have a report that gives council the full picture to consider, or this would be the alternative.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'm certainly inclined to support recommendation A from staff to move the agenda forward. I think to Councillor Now's point, I'd be more inclined, honestly, to see the elegant transfer of the fire hall assets from the old fire hall to the new fire hall, and kind of wrap up and mothball the old fire hall and leave it unused throughout the summer. I think if we start moving public works into the fire hall, it'll be that much more complex to inevitably go somewhere else. And at least that would give the market, a blank canvas to evaluate on what it could be. I think once we start having dump trucks and backhoes and front end loaders and things like that inside that building, I think then it'll be that much more of a challenge to try to get the imagination of the private sector and the community as a whole into thinking what the building would look like. So I do think there is some time element here, and I know, but on the other hand, listen, I mean, I can't really lose a lot of sleep about the anxiety around the timing. This item, this requirement, which I completely acknowledge is real, it's never been really even added onto our capital priority list yet. So the idea that the sky will fall if we wait 6 months, so be it. So I agree that the existing facility is antiquated and needs replacement. I think we're all in agreement there. I just don't think that there's a requirement to make sure that the equipment is moved to the existing hall next month. Like I think that would be a poor idea. So I think given the CAO the flexibility through scenario A, or the first option that was proposed there as far as a motion, would allow us to get the ball started. And then, as the deputy mayor mentioned, being able to query the market on valuations just gives us information. And to Councillor Carver's point, I think, I'm open-minded about divestiture for money or divestiture as an in-kind contribution towards an incredible project. It's just, we can't get to that point yet unless we get through these first couple items. So this is a pretty exciting opportunity. But I just think we maybe need to, by approving that first motion, I think we'll start the ball rolling.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Feeney. Deputy Mayor.
Can I move it?
You certainly can if you'd like to.
Yeah, just as Dylan had put it, can you read it for me, Dylan? I was trying to remember.
Option A.
Yeah, option A, yeah. Option.
Yeah, I can certainly, it was that staff be directed to issue a request for proposals for pre-design and estimation services in relation to a proposed new public works garage.
Yeah.
Okay. You've heard the motion. Councillor Wilson seconds it. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay. I think that, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor, yeah?
So do we need a motion to get I guess a current market estimate for what that building or that property might?
CAO?
I think if there's an interest in moving forward in that direction, I'm just going to share my screen again because there's been a couple of issues raised that I think probably need to be accommodated in one or more motions if council wants to move in that direction. So what I'm suggesting here is the first one, the staff be directed to assess the potential for subdivision of the old fire station from the remaining town property and resolution of any title issues such as may need to be resolved for divestiture. Because I think if we're really seriously contemplating moving it out of town hands, that's actually necessary before even really proceeding to evaluation. Possibly also the second one, and I know this is tricky, but that staff be directed to obtain a condition review of the old fire station building and an associated valuation for potential divestiture. I'm putting the condition review in there because there are two ways to go about the valuation. And one would be with eyes open on that, and one would be not. So you could just skip that part and say associated valuation. It looks at similar structures based on square footage that have sold recently in our area. It's the simple kind of evaluation report, but it's certainly less costly. So those are a couple of recommendations that council might want to consider in terms of the old building.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hyde. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Carver.
Did you want to go, Councillor Carver, before because I wanted to move?
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor, the chair has recognized you to speak, please.
Okay. So I'd like to move the first motion, and then maybe the second motion without the condition. If you can read them for us, that would be helpful.
Yeah, well, that's the first motion was that staff be directed to assess the potential for subdivision of the old fire station from the remaining town property and resolution of any title issues as may need to be resolved for divestiture.
I'll
Okay,
second that motion.
thank you. Councillor Carver seconds. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor Carver?
Oh, I was going to move that first one. I'd like to look at the other motion again, if the CAO would.
Yeah, I can
Share
now.
it again?
I haven't changed it per the deputy mayor's point about the condition review. So the simple form of this would be that staff be directed to obtain a valuation of the old fire station building for potential divestiture. So that just leaves out the condition review part. And like I said, it would just base it on the square footage and age of the building and similar buildings of similar age and square footage that have been sold in the immediate area in recent times. So it's just a comparative review without looking inside the building.
So I would move then that staff be directed to obtain a comparative review of the old fire station building and an associated valuation for potential divestiture.
Okay. A comparative review, Councillor Carver?
I use that word picking up from the Mr. Hyde's
Okay.
notion of a comparative review.
Okay, and do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson has got his Churchill signal up. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? That motion is carried as well. Thank you. Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, I'd also move that council direct staff to include a placeholder for a public works built garage within the 10-year capital plan that will be discussed within the budget process.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds that one. CAO?
So Joe, I know you made this point. I didn't want to like have to go off on a bit of a tangent, but if there actually is a placeholder in the long-term budget for this, it's just
Okay.
only in the 10-year budget. I'll just put it up on the screen for 1 sec here. So this has at the top, it's actually the first item in the budget of like 100 items. Number 1, public works garage / office, and it just says to build, acquire, renovate public works utility facility. The notion at that time was that in the fiscal year that we're just entering into, we would be doing design for the building, and then in the following fiscal year would either be renovating or building something new. So we're pretty much on course with that. The only thing that's way off is, I think, the amount of money associated with building.
Fair enough. Well, that's excellent. I stand corrected, Dylan, and thanks very much for that clarification. I think once again, you're ahead of the game, so appreciate that.
Okay.
So I know we got to discussion on the motion before I could say anything. So I don't know if you want to withdraw the motion at that point, Joe.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to withdraw it, Mayor.
All right. And the seconder has agreed to withdraw. Okay, anything else? No, that finishes our agenda. 12:52, 8 minutes shy. We did well. Very
Yeah, that was
good.
very impressive, everyone.
I'm gonna have to
Thank you.
put that 8 minutes in the bank against the 4.5 hour meetings.
Right.
Clerk, do we have anyone online who has a question for us?
Can't hear you.
It says, in many communities, churches operate or provide spaces for daycares to operate. Mahone Bay has a number of churches that may make more sense and require little renovation to make suitable daycares. Have the churches ever been approached to provide spaces for daycares?
Councillor Wilson, I believe, was part of a group that investigated a couple of years ago. Councillor
Yeah.
Wilson?
The answer is yes. All of the churches have been approached, I think in 2015, so 7 years ago. And first of all, there's a huge amount of renovation required for a daycare. It's not a small thing at all. But in any event, all 5 churches said no, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other, Councillor, I'm sorry, Clerk, any other questions from the citizens? Okay,
That was all, Your Worship. Thank you.
hearing none. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
It's not needed.
Councillor Burdick, Councillor Carver seconds, all in favor?